during this HIE Awareness Month, get together with one of our incredible partners, Dr. Kenji A from ReAlta Life Sciences. Kenji, it's so great to be back with you. We have been updating our community along the way about this partnership and this very exciting, innovative therapeutic option that we're really excited to see how this translates into clinical trials in the neonatal space. So welcome today. Welcome everyone who's joining us. Feel free to let us know where you're joining from in the comments section, and then any questions that you have along the way, and we'll try to answer them. So let's start a little bit at the beginning here. And Kenji, if you could just give us a quick introduction about yourself and a little bit of the background and history of this, amazing innovation that you discovered.
Thanks so much, Betsy, and thanks for inviting us back to have another chat. Always exciting and a lovely time to spend with you and to discuss, what we're all doing to try and change the future for babies that are affected by this really potentially devastating disease process and the massive impacts it has on families as well. So our journey started quite a long time ago, over a decade and a half. I'm an infectious diseases pediatrician. I provided clinical care to children for 30 years. I was also a basic scientist, working in a laboratory studying inflammation. And I have been collaborating for about 16, 17 years with a PhD scientist, Dr. Neil Krishna, who is an expert in molecular structure function of proteins and peptides. And we made this discovery early on around this rather curious virus that causes a diarrhea in young children, but it doesn't cause any inflammation. So this makes it fairly unique among viruses. And we wanted to understand what was going on there. Was the virus just really super duper stealthy, or was it doing something to prevent inflammation, normal inflammatory responses that create pain and warmth and irritation? Was it doing something to actively prevent that from happening? And so my scientific partner here was able to identify a piece of one of the viral proteins that looked a lot like other molecules that are known to inhibit certain parts of the inflammatory system. He asked what I thought about it because it actually happened to be in my space of expertise. And I said, well, viruses are incredibly clever. You give them a couple 100 million years of evolution and they can really figure out some really incredible things, how to unlock certain things or dampen them down. And we actually ran an assay. We ran an assay all the time in our laboratory that this was sort of well suited to. So we put it in the assay and saw a profound effect. And we thought, wow, that's really remarkable. And we have something here that could potentially bring something new to the table in terms of being able to inhibit inflammatory responses. So during my time as a physician, my most frustrating periods and times have been when I knew I could make a diagnosis, and I was able to make a diagnosis, and I knew what was driving the disease process, but I knew I didn't have the right tool. I didn't have the right medicine to address the disease process in an optimal way. You can kind of think about it like if you have a cathedral ceiling in the house and you need to change a light bulb that's gone out, and all you have is like a hammer and a screwdriver, you're going to have a really tough time changing that light bulb that's 15 feet up in the air until somebody comes along and invents the telescoping light bulb changer. And then, it's a 10-second process and it's super easy, but it's because you have the right tool. And this is actually a problem that physicians encounter on a pretty regular basis, and it's one of their highest causes of frustration is to know they don't have the right tools. So you use the tools you have, even though you know they're not going to work very well, and they can potentially cause some pretty bad side effects. So when we made this discovery, it became clear that this was going to be a new tool, that nothing like it existed, and it was going to be able to do things in completely new ways, and provide a completely novel tool. So yeah, in terms of developing medicines, I come from the world of infectious diseases, so I tend to think about things as in terms of antibiotics. So you've got Cipro, and you've got son of Cipro, and then grandson of Cipro, and great grandson of Cipro, and so all these minor molecular tweaks, all on the same theme, all on the same basic molecule, and so you get these minor variations in terms of activity, but basically it's still the same thing at the end of the day, and it really functions sort of the same. But with our molecule, completely different actions, activities, and really a new way to address disease processes. So there was a neonatologist who was working at our children's hospital, who joined my lab, and he wanted to really get into understanding the processes underlying hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So the classic model, animal model for HIE, was developed by Dr. Vannucci and Rice. So he actually went up to Dr. Vannucci's lab, learned the model there, brought it back to where we are, and started doing it. And as he started to really understand what was going on there, it became clear to him that our molecule had some properties that would hit a number of the major inflammatory processes that play into the brain injury of HIE. So as many of the folks are aware, there's a big reperfusion injury process. So when the baby's born, the brain is cut off from oxygen for a period of time. But then when the oxygenated blood flow is reestablished, much or even most of the brain damage actually occurs during that reperfusion phase, when the oxygenated blood flow gets flowing again to the brain. And so get a lot of inflammation and swelling, and that's when a lot of the damage occurs. And that's really the window of opportunity to be able to moderate that and modify that. And cooling does that a bit by decreasing some of the metabolism that's going on in the brain for those 3 days that cooling is done. But there are all these other aspects of inflammation that cooling doesn't really have a significant effect on. And so what we started to see as the neonatologists in our lab started using the compound in this HIE rat pup model, was that we were affecting and dampening down other parts of inflammation that are important to HIE, and actually doing it in a way that provided an additive effect to hypothermia. So the drug worked great on its own. Hypothermia worked a little bit its own, but when you combine them, he actually got a better effect than either one independently. And so we were able to not only show the mechanisms were unique, or was providing unique mechanisms to decrease the inflammation, but we were getting better neuron survival, decreasing the amount of tissue injury that was occurring to the brain, the volume of injury, the intensity of the injury. And then we also looked at long-term outcomes. So allowing the rats to grow up to adult age, and like, how is their cognitive function? How is their thinking? How smart are they? And we actually saw really nice effects that actually played out all the way into adulthood, where the rats were much smarter. We put them through a maze, and they were much more clever than if they didn't get those interventions. So that's where our journey started. It's been a long journey, a very exciting journey. It's been very rewarding, and as a pediatrician, and having taken care of children for really my entire medical career, it became clear that this was a unique opportunity, and opportunity we could not not pursue. So, we had very successful, I had a successful medical practice. My partner and I, my scientific partner and I had very successful scientific careers. But it became clear that if we wanted to develop these as drugs, we need, as a potential drug for babies with HIE, we needed to quit our day jobs and form a company that could really accelerate the advancement. So that's what we did. Bit of a risky proposition at our stages of life and where we were in our careers, but it was something that we felt absolutely compelled we had to do. It was the right thing to do. The guiding principle throughout my career and the number one core value at ReAlta Life Sciences is do what's right for the patient. And so this has always been our guiding light, and this is what drives us, motivates us, and gives us so much energy to pursue this.
Wow. I mean, that, just so appreciative of this work that you're doing. The notion of discovery, of scientific discovery, is exciting on its own, but obviously it hits very, very closely for our community. And just, I was struck a little bit by continue to be in our work together of so much of the drive forward concurrently between the work that you have been doing, the work that we've been doing on the patient advocacy and support side, and just kind of that alignment as we come together, and obviously our theme, as everyone can see, is connected by hope this month. And I think it's so appropriate and such an embodiment of this, talking about, doing the right thing by our families and our patients on all angles. And just I know when we started Hope, and again, kind of the same thing, like on a concurrent way of growing on the side, and like then taking the risk to, grow more and knowing that it's the right thing to do. And so, when we started conversations, actually several, I know that a former board member of ours, Nick Burton, had attended, I believe it was like 2016 or 2015, an initial HIE symposium that you hosted.
Yes.
And so I know that when he brought those learnings back of just like the state of HIE research and development and things, we learned so much at that point. And that was like, we're like the little tiny mouse baby. It's an point. And now to see, how we are moving forward. So those of you that are tuning in, if you haven't learned before about this relationship that we've had with ReAlta, we have been ReAlta as their top core value with the amazing leadership there are all our people that have been working in particular on the medical care and innovation. And as we come together, we've been hosting focus groups and things to learn about how we can best come together and support this innovation moving forward. Everyone knows that, cooling was a landmark discovery and has helped so many babies and decreased death and disability in a lot of ways, but is lacking in also a lot of ways. And so we're ripe for something new and impactful. And so let's talk a little bit about how we've been working and how we're now in the process of taking this scientific discovery in this preclinical space and how it gets to neonatal trials, which our community is very familiar with because we have many families that have participated over the past couple decades in those initial cooling trials, and then in trials along the way, looking at different possibilities for therapeutic improvement.
Yeah, fantastic. It's really been a joy to watch Hope for HIE's growth, both as an organization all on your own, and you have had tremendous growth over the past several years. in no small part due to your fantastic efforts, Betsy, but also the synergistic growth of our organizations together over these past years. We bring different strengths, different perspectives, and there's this wonderful synergy really between these two organizations. One sort of coming from a more of a pharmaceutical and discovery side, which is obviously our side, as well as the patient advocacy, the family-centered side, the not-for-profit sort of NGO type side, and there are these wonderful synergies because we both have different strengths that can play well together and produce even better outcomes, hopefully for the babies and the families, and provide a more holistic, more comprehensive approach and advantages to optimize outcomes. So I think I've forgotten the other part of this question.
So I think, it's kind of, I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, like how you take like that preclinical work in, discovery, and then what kind of the process is moving it through these different stages to get it to, trial that enrolls babies, like, has been done with cooling and things like that.
Yeah. It's a long road. And there are a lot of steps. There's a lot of regulatory oversight, that's directed by the FDA predominantly, but to ensure safety, and that potential medications that make it to patients are both as safe as they can be and show promise to potentially bend the curve of the disease process and result in better outcomes, better lives for patients. So it is a long and complex journey. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but it needs to be done. And organizations like ours that have the core values that we do, that have the mission and the vision that we do, we are happy. We are excited to take the hard road and go through all of the testing that's required, all of the animal testing that's required, all of the safety testing in animals that's required. There are a whole bunch of other different types of safety testing that's also done in sort of more of a benchtop type situation. And then we get into actually dosing, giving doses of the medicine to humans. So like for our medicine, we've done 2 adult trials. The first one was a safety trial where we get ever increasing doses to adults. And at this point, or in that initial trial, we didn't see any side effects, which is fantastic. And that was one of the key criteria that the FDA was like, if you want to take this into babies, that's I mean, obviously we understood, but they told us again to remind us that this is a super vulnerable population. Yeah, we get that. We know that. We come from a pediatric background, so yeah. But they said it has to be super clean in terms of safety. It has to be super safe. Otherwise, you can't move forward. So we were able to demonstrate this incredibly clean safety profile at doses up to more than 40 times what the first baby who receives a dose of our medicine will get. So a huge safety margin there. And then the second trial that we did was really to show that the mechanisms of action translate from our animal disease models into humans. So that was a trial that was completed last year, and it showed that our mechanisms of action actually translate beautifully. So where in the development of medicines, where the 2 most common reasons for failure is the drug proves not to be safe, and so that pretty much kills the development. And the second way that drugs most commonly die, drugs in development commonly die, is that it works great in an animal with some disease or a simulated disease, but then it doesn't translate into humans because humans aren't rats, humans aren't mice. And so so that second trial that we did with adults in an induced, actually lung disease process, showed that the mechanisms translated beautifully. So we've kind of overcome sort of the two biggest hurdles: one, safety, and then two, do the mechanisms by which the drug also work in humans? Does it work the same way in humans as it does in the animal disease model? So these things are expensive. They take time. They're tricky to design. And then there's a whole bunch of analysis that goes into the back end. But this is how you progress the development of a medicine towards something that can then, as the next step, and certainly our next step is, because it's passed all of these hurdles, been able to leap all these different hurdles, looks really prime and in a really great place to be able to then move into humans that are sick. And in our case, babies that are sick. So very vulnerable population, but also a wonderful opportunity because, in pediatrics, you've got a whole lifetime ahead of these babies and or young children to affect. I mean, what we do in those first few days of life has an impact that plays out over decades and decades and decades, and has such a huge ripple effect across the family and the community. So it's really a unique opportunity, a point in time to completely change the long-term outcomes, the lifespan, all the different aspects of happiness and productivity and all the other things that go into a good life.
Yeah, that, and of course that hits so deeply home for us. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for children and families impacted by HIE. And we know all of, in the wide range of outcomes with HIE. So I'm really especially fascinated and encouraged to hear, of maybe some of those long-term outcomes that we know that cooling might not have helped as much with, or we know are impacted regardless of cooling, when that cognitive, executive functioning, and those impacts have been less, I think, emphasized in HIE, but we see the lived experience as a huge impact. And so I think that, for that is just remarkable to hear about in the preclinical evidence, and the hope that can translate, certainly as these trials progress. So you're in this, in the state now of approaching and getting ready to launch this trial. And so for people that are tuning in that might not understand kind of the different trial models, there's some times where you would do a single study, but the biggest kind of bang for your buck is really to see if you can get multi centers to opt in, like they did with the, kind of taking this initial cooling model of looking at moderate to severe babies first. And again, it's like a established protocol that, the HEAL study followed and you're following and things like that, kind of these landmark trials in HIE. So we will know, right? And some of the assessment that's being done to know quickly as well what the potential impact is, because we know you just talked about like the long road to getting to here, which we know can prohibit and slow down that development, that critical development that we need. So as you're preparing, what does it look like? As you're, I obviously got a chance to be on a call on Friday with some of the site investigators, but what does that look like, for people joining at home that are just learning about, taking again that next step into enrolling babies?
Well, we're at an incredibly exciting point in time. So right now we are bringing a number of the big neonatal intensive care unit centers around the country together to participate in our clinical trial for babies with HIE. There's a lot of, these are really complex things to put together. There's oversight from the FDA, there are local ethics committees and institutional review boards, and the input from all of the different investigators. And we've had fantastic help along the way. We were founded, our founding institutions included a children's hospital as well as the subspecialty pediatricians for that children's hospital. So I've been drawing on the free advice of the neonatologists at our local children's hospital, like nine of them or so, for over a decade. So we've had so much input from not only our local folks, but the top experts in the world in terms of brain MRIs for babies, EEG, which is measuring the electrical activity and seizures in babies. So it takes a long time to bring all that expertise together and fold it into a single trial. But we feel extremely confident that we've brought together all of the critical pieces with all of the best advice that is available to bring to bear. We think this will be the best clinical trial for babies with HIE that's ever been conducted, and will help inform folks in the future who design new trials with other whether they're looking at diagnostics or whatever. But we think our trial will actually help inform and make all future trials a little bit better than what they have been to date, which is, that's a scientific process. You're always building upon standing upon the shoulders of those who came before. But we're now about a month and a half from being able to go live at a number of these neonatal intensive care units. A tremendously exciting time for us as a company, for me personally, to be able to, now for the first time, hopefully be able to treat babies with HIE, decrease the inflammation in their brains, decrease the amount of injury that occurs to the brain, and then be able to show not only the immediate benefits, hopefully fewer seizures, decreased brain injury on the brain MRIs, but then also we will follow these babies out and look at their long-term outcomes. Certainly one of the most important aspects of sort of that long-term follow-up is a tool that Hope for HIE has helped us develop. We've developed as a collaboration, which is the first really robust quality of life tool for infants and babies under 2 years of age. So when we started putting our trial design together, one of the aspects that hasn't been such a major part of clinical trial design in the past, but is starting to gain more and more traction, or what's called patient-centered outcomes, or in our case, family-centered outcomes. So more than just looking at the physical disabilities, also incorporating evaluation of how the mental and emotional development plays out. How does it affect the family, both financially and emotionally, and the relationships of the parents and caregivers with the affected child, but also all the other children in that family are affected as well. So I know you've experienced this probably millions of times at this point, Betsy, but HIE seems to be a disease process that's sort of like 1 or 2 degrees of separation for everybody.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Everybody knows somebody that's been affected.
Yeah, even if
usually
they, I was gonna say, even if they, don't know the exact name, they certainly, and the more, I call there's a couple things. I call a lot of things hope winks as things come together, in this work. But I don't know if it's just like I have known a lot of people or just whatever, more attuned to it along the way over the past almost 11 years. But yeah, I've personally known several people that that I was connected to, whether through school or work, who have gone, you know, including, I'll just share a short story for those of you that don't know. But on my own son Max's first birthday, I got a call from a very dear friend of mine, in tears, on my way to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, letting me know that her twin sister, who I also was friends with, and we all went to college together, had given birth to a baby, and he was in cooling, and his name was Max. So we actually have gotten the Maxes together as well. But you know, just like it's all that to say that, you know, I've had friends that I went to camp with in high school and went to, you know, whatever, that have reached out over the years going through this. And so you just never know, you know, how it's going to impact. The incidence rate obviously is pretty significant. It's not as rare, I think, as some people have painted it. It's, you know, 2 to 3 per 1,000 live births. So it's still a small population, but it's also not that small when you think about, you know, that number. And so, yeah, when we talk about, you know, that longitudinal need and understanding, part of, you know, what we experience as parents, and what I was so grateful for our community to bring to this project, in the understanding, is a lot of these follow-ups are so cumbersome for families that there's just like, you know, hours of assessments, which for a lot of people makes it really difficult. Again, our HIE impacts, you know, it does not discriminate, so it impacts everyone around the world, across socioeconomic lines and things like that. And so, you know, when families are looking at wanting to enroll and follow up and things like that, a lot of the feasibility of that comes into play, and making sure that they're as supported as possible to make this meaningful. And I think what this tool does is it takes a lot of the need of some of these really, like, these buckets of assessments that are like just long in each of their, you know, in their specialty, and taking, you know, some of the really core important outcomes and measurements across the full scope of, you know, impact to the child and family, and being able to, you know, really make it the most efficient use, to, you know, take or administer as a someone on the clinical side, but also get really meaningful and actionable information out of it. So, you know, when we talk about mental health, at a lack of access in a community or a disconnect to additional support. You know, the goal, I know, is to see if there's, you know, kind of a threshold that some of these domains cross over, and then be able to, you know, again, that holistic support of the family. Is there, you know, social worker involvement or another community agency or Hope for HIE that can step in and, you know, serve those unmet needs of those families along the way, of those impacts that we know are can be so significant. So housing and, you know, things like that, of, you know, so much is called into question when you join this community, and when you go through this experience of, you know, these hopes and dreams and life that you thought you were planning ahead, all gets called into question, you know. And you know, the impact we covered, Super Sibs last week, you know, the impact of this whole family well-being is extremely important, and it does impact so many facets of family life, extended family, caregiver support, you know, things like that. Just, you know, it is very wide reaching. So that part of it is so critically important. And I'm so glad that we were able to come together for that. And then when we talk about longitudinal support, I think this is probably a good time to dovetail into kind of the partnership level that we are expanding on, and things that we know that kind of, and really a lot of it is very not build together of this, you know, the support throughout the study for families, and things that we've learned and families have shared with us along the way of enrolling in clinical trials, wanting to connect, wanting to be supported, and needing that support, you know, making sure they understand when these different assessment points come up, how to prepare for them, what's really going to be happening. So we're able to bring in the resources of the organization that we've built, life specialist, our social worker, our peer support, because, you know, a lot of these assessments, I know that, you know, you can talk a little bit more maybe about the follow-up. But if there's any procedures or, diagnostic testing, those sometimes are really hard for parents to prep their babies and children for. And we're able to, we've been able so far to, when we've brought on our child life specialist, to start, develop these tools for families to use to have a better, smoother assessment and follow-up visit.
Yeah, incredibly important points that you bring up. In order to get a new medicine approved, it's a long road, and there's so much more than just, well, how do they wind up doing physically? Did more babies wind up with cerebral palsy, or fewer babies wind up with cerebral palsy? That's only one tiny aspect, and it's absolutely vital. And we certainly couldn't do this without your help, is to be able to look more comprehensively and get this much broader and incredibly important picture of all these different impacts that have largely been underappreciated, certainly by regulatory agencies, but perhaps even the communities as a whole have not appreciated that. And so to be able to partner with HIE that can provide this longitudinal support, this feedback as the child continues through the subsequent steps in the trial. This really enhances the robustness of the trial. It tremendously enhances the robustness of the data, which is eventually what the FDA will be reviewing in terms of deciding whether this is a medicine that they will give approval to. But supporting the families in all of the different ways that you mentioned, with social workers and other folks that can give feedback and education and all of these other aspects that are so important, because I don't think it's been a major emphasis in clinical trials, even clinical trials that have been developed by academics who are certainly seeing and taking care of patients. But the aspect of this, it's really is a long-term partnership between say us and the families and the babies that will participate in our clinical trial. We certainly want them to continue to be involved, engaged, and be getting the feedback like, hey, what has been learned? What, how is this going to impact future babies that are affected, future families that are affected by HIE? And so having Hope for HIE as a partner to us moving forward through these first years of life for the babies that do participate has so many of these ancillary benefits, these additional benefits that are so important and have largely been unrecognized, underappreciated, and underutilized in the past. So we're really, really excited to be able to have this really fantastic collaboration, because we all have the same goal, and be able to bring more of these aspects together, make it more comprehensive, more holistic, and provide a better experience for everybody involved.
Definitely. Well, we are so, again, grateful for the opportunity and very obviously excited about what's ahead to kind of put the rubber to the road and see where we land. I keep saying that there is this renaissance in HIE research and attention, but as we started the conversation, that has started many years ago to get us to this point. And so I think we're just seeing a lot of this acceleration that's happening, that, again, our organizational name is Hope for HIE, and this, I feel, is such the embodiment of really knowing that there is hope for the future, for to decrease the the incidence and the impact of HIE for brighter futures for these families. So Kenji, I haven't seen anything new in the questions that we haven't been able to address. But any final thoughts? I think we covered so much, and we will keep everyone updated along the way, like we have. I'm just so grateful again that you took time today and that we've been able to get to this point and move forward. And just again, so grateful for your support of and dedication to the HIE community. I think often about, going back to, newly diagnosed me, and newly diagnosed all of our long-term families. And if they could imagine what it would, that this was possible. My child won't benefit, a lot of other children won't, because we're, further down the path. But this opens, I don't think people necessarily appreciate sometimes how much this opens for other innovations to happen and accelerate. So, I know we have a lot of people in our community across many ages, stages, and outcomes. And so this is really next gen stuff that, is again, opening doors for the potential, out there for many other innovations within HIE. So Kenji, any final thoughts?
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. I always enjoy speaking with you, Betsy, and it's a wonderful opportunity to bring people up to date on some of the new innovations. Again, our collaboration with Hope for HIE goes back years and years, has been tremendously enriching for us and hopefully for you as well. And I think we have developed a bunch of new things that we're bringing to the table for future clinical trials for HIE. Certainly the STAR quality of life tool. I mean, there's nothing like it that exists. It really was built really for this community. It'll be a tool that I think will be used hopefully in all future clinical trials involving babies with HIE, whether it's therapeutics or diagnostics or devices or what have you. But I think it really will change how innovation, how research, how next steps are taken in terms of improving the care for children with HIE. So we're phenomenally excited to be working with HIE to develop this new tool that we think is, we hope our medicine will change the lives of babies. But all these other innovations that are a part of this journey will have sort of spin-off effects. I mean, you read articles about, oh, well, NASA sent people to the moon, and all these other technologies have flowed out of that from, things that eventually wound up making mobile phones possible and things like that. And that's how I see this journey as well. And it wouldn't be possible without HIE to Hope for HIE to be able to innovate and create these, maybe call them spin-off technologies that will provide other ancillary and really unanticipated benefits.
For sure. Well, Kenji, thank you again so much, and to the whole team at ReAlta. Looking forward to the time ahead, and everyone that's been tuning in, thank you so much. We look forward to sharing more in the future. Everyone have a great day. Take care.
Thank you so much, Betsy.